Okay, let's get down to business to defeat the Huns, because this is indeed today's topic, the final topic of the day, and it's a pretty significant one for sure. Apologies for the voice, by the way. I know it's getting worse. It sounds worse. It feels worse too. But I am coughing a little less than I had been over the previous few days, so there is some silver lining to this entire situation. But let's talk about teams in the NHL that are eliminated. Let's talk about free agents to be, and which teams, according to some NHL analysts, might just have dipped their toes into the free agent pool itself. Our sights lie in Nashville, Tennessee, the world-renowned Music City. The town of country music certainly does have so many historical things to go out there and look at, but they also happen to have a hockey team. And when it comes to the biggest name on this hockey team that is going to be a free agent, we're talking about Filip Forsberg. Now, Forsberg this season is in a pretty interesting situation. He's 27 years old, he'll be 28 by the start of next season, 6'2", 205 as a right-handed winger. He's signed to a $6 million AAV contract, which does expire this year. He had been making $6 million a year ever since the 2016-17 season. This year, though, was the absolute coming-out party for Forsberg and his play. While it's true that he was an effective point producer in the previous seasons, with, for example, a 64-point campaign in 67 games in 2017-18, he was limited by injuries to not playing all too much over the next few years. This season, however, he played 69 games, but he absolutely exploded with 84 points in that sample. 42 goals, 42 assists, absolutely bananas season for Filip Forsberg, and this guy is going to be a free agent soon. This is what David Poile said yesterday when it comes to the update on Forsberg and the contract negotiations. There is indeed mutual interest that remains between the Predators and Forsberg to keep Forsberg in Nashville. For today, though, and for the next month, or however long it takes, we're going to concentrate on signing Forsberg. The verbatim quote is right here. I can't give you an update on the status, but there is mutual interest in remaining a Nashville Predator. However, in the off chance that Forsberg does indeed become a free agent and he does not re-sign in Music City, there are some really interesting conversations that you can have about where he's going to go instead. This is what Elliotte Friedman said on the recent episode of the 32 Thoughts podcast. One thing I'm really curious about is, does LA make a run at a guy like Filip Forsberg? I saw a team against the Oilers that really had to work to score goals. Merrick also chipped in, and he sees the Bruins and Canucks being interested in Forsberg as well. Not to mention the Colorado Avalanche if Nazem Kadri ends up leaving. Now, there is an entire discussion we can have about the Colorado Avalanche because that team is just really good, but as I said at the beginning, I only wanted to focus on teams that are not in the playoffs right now, so Colorado, sorry, that's a conversation for another day. Maybe when you guys get eliminated, we can talk about you then. But we still have a great variety of other teams to discuss as well. The LA Kings, the Boston Bruins, and the Vancouver Canucks. So, let's go over these three teams, their situations, and how a guy like Filip Forsberg could help them out next season, and what a contract should potentially look like. Actually, that's probably the bigger thing we need to discuss firstly, because yeah, I mean, Forsberg and his play was so good this season that you probably do have to talk about the money first before you go into anything else. Forsberg is a guy that could be paid like an absolute superstar on his next contract. I think the only thing that's really holding him back is longevity and his ability to stay healthy to be in the lineup because he hasn't played a full 82-game season in 5 years it's been. Sure, he produced like crazy when he was there, but there is still some intangibles that lie in how available a guy can be for his team. Injuries aside, though, Forsberg is definitely a crazy good talent, and as we said, he came into his own this season. The question is he going to be able to produce like this over the next, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years? I think he's certainly good enough to do that, it's just you gotta remember last season he was barely under a point per game. While his over point per game season this year is amazing to look at, I could understand if you were reserved a little bit when it came to saying that he's guaranteed to hit that same mark for the next few seasons combined. If you look at the points, I mean, 84 divvy 69, which is a very nice number by the way, multiplied out by 82, Forsberg was on pace for 99.8 points, 100 points. Is Forsberg a 100-point player? I'll be honest, he's not the first guy that comes to mind when I think about 100 points, but you can't deny that he just had a 100-point caliber season, just in fewer games played. And so for a contract extension and what that potentially looks like, I would not be surprised if Forsberg went out there and asked for a longer-term 7-8-year deal where he's able to cash in on the season he just had, let's say at $7.5–8 million a year. Sure, he technically can play center according to elite prospects, but this is a guy that had a whole bunch of production, and he's got all the right in the world to say, hey, look at this leverage right here. I scored 42 goals and 42 assists in only 69 games this season. Give me money. He has the absolute right to go out there and do that. So, for the LA Kings, I mean, they've got about $20-ish million in cap space, and the guys they need to re-sign are, to be honest, not really the biggest names in the world. Troy Stecher, Alex Edler, you have forwards like Athanasiou, Adrian Kempe. Sure, some of these guys could demand some money, but I don't see anybody on here that's going to absolutely break the bank. So I think it would be a safe assumption to say that, hey, there probably is some opportunity here for Forsberg to head over to LA and for the Kings to be able to afford it. They did indeed struggle to score goals against the Edmonton Oilers. They really had to rely on their defensive game to take the series to 7 games. If they had somebody with the release and the offensive talent like Forsberg on their team, they probably would have had an easier time beating Mike Smith in the series. I mean, come on, you saw the Battle of Alberta yesterday. That guy's pretty easy to beat, isn't he? Okay, all joking aside, the Kings probably could benefit from a guy like Forsberg coming over, but they are not the only team that is in this conversation too. Let's talk as well about the Boston Bruins and the Vancouver Canucks. Starting out with my Canucks, because this is a team that I do think has some conversing to do when it comes to their long-term forwards. I'd seen a lot of Canucks fans talking about the long-term projectability of the guys on the team, and what exactly a player like Filip Forsberg could bring should you potentially move out a JT Miller, for example. If you really wanted to maximize both team performance and what you could get in a trade, why not trade a JT Miller and then replace him on the team with a 28-year-old Filip Forsberg? You would technically be getting younger with a move like this, and you would be replacing the caliber of talent that Miller had with another player who was also on pace for 100 points in the year. Heck, scratch that. Let's round down. Forsberg was on pace for 99 points this season, which is what Miller ended up getting. You could see why the Filip Forsberg argument makes sense for a lot of Canucks people who want JT Miller traded, because you could maximize his return by getting all the assets while also keeping the talent on the roster. Plus, if you were on the boat of signing JT Miller long-term anyway, I mean, Forsberg would probably be in the same dollar amount, if not a little bit less, because he doesn't play as much as Miller does, plus the fact that Miller frequently plays center. I don't really know if Forsberg does that on Nashville, because Duchesne and everything, you got some pretty good centers on Nashville. So for Forsberg, I could understand if he actually went for a little bit less than JT did on the open market. But then again, you know, it is the open market, it's free agency, so players always go for a little bit more than what they normally would have had they only been acquired via team rights, ownership, or whatever. And then you talk about the Boston Bruins. This is a team that a lot of people have defined as a one-line team. A team that's got 3 good players in Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak, and then I guess you could say Taylor Hall as well, but a team that did need some extra scoring depth throughout the rest of their lineup. Now, with Patrice Bergeron's future actually being up in the air as well, who really knows where the Bruins are going to go with this entire conversation, but Filip Forsberg being a guy that could be on their radar makes sense to me as well. They also needed some extra goal-scoring help, and a guy like Forsberg, while he might not be available for a full 82-game season because of injury concerns, he still is a talented enough player that he could definitely add a spark to that team. It's just a question as to whether or not they would give him the environment to succeed, you know? Because if it's a one-line team up there with Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak, you have Forsberg playing with Hall and Charlie Coyle, I guess. Is that really a line that's going to be able to go out there and succeed? I mean, Forsberg and Hall, pretty good right there, so hopefully that is good enough to work, but either way, can let me know in the comments all your thoughts about these 3 teams, the Kings, the Canucks, and the Bruins, talking about Filip Forsberg and whether or not they could go out there, target this guy, and sign him to their teams for next season, should he actually go to free agency. There still is the very real possibility, though, that he does re-sign with the Predators. As David Poyle ended up saying yesterday, there's still mutual interest and they're still conversing about it. But if he does go to free agency and you're a fan of the Kings, the Bruins, or the Canucks, let me know in the comments all your thoughts about signing Filip Forsberg to your hockey team. Would you do it? Would you not? If you do decide to do it, what's the max amount of money that you would be willing to give out? If you're a Canucks fan, would you rather shell out that money for a Miller instead, or trade Miller, sign Forsberg, and keep all the assets and the talent on the team too? Also, if you're a Predators fan and you want to see this guy stick around on your team, because of course you do, why would you want him to leave? What's the dollar amount that you'd feel comfortable signing him at? It's an interesting conversation, so I want you to tell me in the comments all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.